construction loans made easy.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about historic homes.
Yeah, you bet, Ed. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate you jumping on. This is one area that I'm really excited to talk about. It's not often that we get historic homes to work on from a construction loan perspective, but I know the clients that are doing them are really, really passionate about it. I guess maybe we can start with Wetmore Construction. Tell me how you guys originally got involved with historic homes, renovating them. Tell me a little bit about that history.
Sure, yeah. So I'm second generation. My dad went to Iowa State, got a degree in forestry. The economy tanked, and he started to get into carpentry. And so that's how we started. I'm from the north side of Wheaton. I grew up there. And so just a byproduct of the market that was out there, a lot of old historic homes, that's what we started with. So that's really how we got into the historic home market.
And when you walk through, so clients reach out to you to do some work. When you're first walking through, what are some of the things that you're first looking for, just to have an idea of what that scope of the project's going to look like?
Yeah, so biggest constraint is always going to be structure. That's where we want to start. We want to make sure that beams are not sagging, joists are not sagging, floors aren't rolling all over the place. Those are going to be the biggest constraints on the scope of the project, what's achievable, impact on budget. And then, of course, it's going to be like the next one's going to be utilities, water, sewer, electric, existing mechanical equipment. Those are going to make a big determination on what the project is going to be and what we can achieve with what we have.
So in terms of surprises when you walk in, and maybe surprises isn't the right term, but maybe significant roadblocks as well, surprises and significant roadblocks. What are some of those things? You mentioned kind of the structure itself. What are some of those other things that you pull the client aside and said, hey, we need to talk about this? Maybe the impact on the project as a whole, or maybe just the cost of the project as well.
Sure. So I would say that, we've been doing this a long time. We're pretty good at walking into a house and reading what we're going to see behind those walls. The biggest ones, budget-wise, are always going to be an addition. Unforeseen conditions would be addition. Bad soil that we can't build an addition on top of, so we have to dig further down. Every once in a while, we open up a ceiling and find some buried electric boxes. We find some plumbing that's not the way that it's supposed to be. Really, though, if we plan properly and if we take all the steps up front to think through the project, we can mitigate most, if not all, of that up front. Where we really see clients stretching budgets is going to be the since you're here's. Since you're here, can you remodel this bathroom also? Since you're here, we've been dying to put in a new driveway. All those things are usually where we see the budget start to grow.
Cities have landmark commissions, and I guess before we get there, let's just maybe define a historic home as well.
Sure, yeah. So I would say, from my perspective, the historic homes that we're working on are homes that were built, somewhere between like 1850 and 1930. Those are the homes that usually present the most challenges. That homeowners are in those homes. They're passionate about maintaining the historic charm of that house. So that's what I would say is a historic home to me.
And some cities have landmark commissions that have really strict guidelines, some not as strict, but guidelines nonetheless. And then I imagine there's some homes that are, you would consider historical, but not under those guidelines. How do those guidelines impact and really drive the design process for the improvements or the renovation of those homes?
Sure. So you're exactly right. It's really dependent and changes from municipality to municipality. Some of them have very strong requirements, and some of them just have some small incentives so that you can get extra lot coverage, more front yard setback, those types of things. I would say that yes, in those towns that it's really strict, it is more constraining on what we can do. But most of the times we know that up front, and so we know we build that into the project right up front. So that's the first steps of the architectural process is what are our constraints historically that we know we're going to run into, and then we build the project around that. And then as far as maintaining the historic appeal of the house, as much as I love to do that, my job is really to deliver what my client's vision is and maintain their budget. And so that's going to be the biggest constraint from my perspective on maintaining that historic home.
So you and Wetmore Construction has a tremendous amount of experience with renovating historical homes. So you look at these guidelines, you know the cities, you know the what probably can be done, what can't be done. What kind of I imagine you have a significant advantage as the builder versus a client going to a builder. Maybe this would be their first one. How is your experience understanding these guidelines helpful in terms of being efficient and cost effective for the client?
Yeah, absolutely. So it helps with that initial first phase where we know we're already a step ahead because we know what the village or the city is going to allow us to do. So we know we can start with those constraints, and then from the perspective of what we can do in a historic home, we're able to walk in and with our experience understand what our constraints are structurally, mechanically with this house. And so that's also going to help us to plan the project. And we can achieve anything, and it becomes a function of budget, really. And so that's really important. That first step up front. If we know your budget is X, and you're asking for Z, then we're going to have to reel you back in or realign on budget.
100%. So, quite often, clients, when they're doing project, they're going to the city for variances. In a historic home, of course, specifically towns that have landmark commissions, are those variances very unlikely to get, or how does that differ from maybe doing a non-historic home?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit easier to get on historic home. When we're doing variances, we have to prove a hardship that what we're doing is impeding on my ability to live in this house and maintain with the market around us. And in a historic home that was built in 1870, that's very likely. That's a really good chance that this house isn't in keeping with the current conditions, the current market. So it makes it a little bit easier to get that variance.
So you don't have to rebuild a home like Lincoln's home down in Springfield, right?
Right.
So you are able to modernize it. So I guess that leads me to, the 1850, 1900 home obviously had a lot more things, lack of things really, than the modern homes do. So do you get that flexibility to be able to put in central air and all those things that are modern conveniences? And then on top of that, what are when landmark commissions are looking at those guidelines, what are the no-goes to make changes on? Is it the facade? Or what other aspects of a historic project really do landmark commissions not really bend on?
Sure. So that's those are my favorite projects. I love those really old homes. A lot of character and just a real challenge, a lot of creativity required. There's a big range there. So it depends on the amount of the historic what the rating of the house, the town that it's in. Most local historic preservation boards only have purview over zoning and then the exterior facade as seen from the public streets. So that's the most common first step. If that's the case, inside the house we can do whatever we want.
Gotcha.
And then there's the National Historic Registry that then if you want to maintain that, and there's some property tax incentives if you do maintain it, that you are required to maintain a lot of the existing interior structure and a lot of the interior existing finishes. They're still going to want you to modernize and add heating and cooling and make sure that it's modern with plumbing and those kind of things. But they want you to try to maintain existing finishes and existing structure in the house. So they may push us if we say that, hey, we want to move this stair to work better for the layout of this house. They might say, oh, you have to keep that stair, but you're welcome to put a new one in somewhere else if you want. And so that type of a project, there's a little bit of negotiation with the board on what they will allow or not allow.
So when you walk into projects, are there typical surprises that you see more common than not when walking through that home for the first time to kind of evaluate the project?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're always looking for that funny addition that just wasn't done quite right. We're looking for sagging joists and beams, that kind of stuff. What we run into, I would say, is mostly just poor quality construction, bad plumbing, electric work, buried boxes, that kind of thing. And then, every once in a while you find structure that's compromised. Somebody remodeled it at some point and cut an entire joist out to fit the toilet in. That kind of stuff is what we typically run into.
So when you think about that balance, right, the balance between the maintaining certainly the original facade and then I would imagine clients who buying historical homes want to probably maintain most of the interior as well and modernize it. I guess what are some of the balances that clients have in terms of modernizing it, and then I guess equally as important, the original craftsmanship, right? Because a lot of the stuff that was put in these older homes uh, it was not expensive back 100 years ago, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly it's a lot more expensive now, and there's cheaper options to go with. So how do clients kind of balance that between the original craftsmanship and kind of some less costly alternatives?
Yeah, so budget is going to be the key determiner there. And we always want to try to maintain as much of the original historic as we possibly can. But you're exactly right that there's most people. For an example, most people don't want cedar siding anymore. It's three times as expensive, and it comes with a lot of maintenance. So we give the client the option, hey, we can do cedar siding, or we can do option A, B, and C that are going to have a 50-year warranty and will look very close, but not like exactly match what you have. And so it's going through that process. It's deciding, hey, we have all these beautiful old doors from the 1920s. Do we match these doors in a custom door that's going to cost $500 a piece? Or do we get something that's very close for $150 a piece? And so that really just becomes a budgeting exercise, and it becomes what is important to the client, and how far do they want to stretch their budget to maintain that.
I lived in as a kid lived in a home that had just the front was cedar, and it was my job to stain it every 3 years. So
I
I
bet
can
you don't have a cedar house anymore.
I don't. So yeah, I feel you on the maintenance part. So when you're ordering these things, I would imagine there's suppliers that probably specialize in historic homes and materials as well.
There are, yeah. There's a million different options out there for suppliers. There are a lot of good suppliers that do focus right on historic preservations, historic materials, historic profiles on trim. And then we've got a lot of great resources just over the years that we've developed. We do a lot of custom trim because you go into a room like a dining room that has a beautiful picture hanging rail and a three-piece crown and a chair rail going around the perimeter that you want to maintain, even though we're opening that opening up by 5 feet and closing that one off. And so we do a lot of custom trim, but we do it in small amounts too, and we do it selectively so that it makes sense for the project and the budget.
Yeah, and you mentioned budget right there. That's a key for most people on a project. If they're doing a construction loan, for example, certainly that budget number matters. There's a few lucky folks that will certainly do projects cash, I'm sure. That budget can determine what kind of appraisal they'll need, which can determine how much they have to put into the loan. So, from a budget perspective, do you start with the wants? Do you start with, okay, this is everything that you can do, and then from there you start trimming back? Take me through a kind of a typical budgeting process with a client on a historic
It
home.
is. So we try to ask the client for, let's swing for the fences here. Let's figure out exactly what you want to do with your house. Let's do a whole house plan so that we understand that, yeah, ultimately, like, yes, we want the kitchen addition. We want a new primary suite on the second floor. We really want a new parlor that we can escape to and get away from the kids on Friday night if we want to. And we have to have a basement that we can send the kids to get them out of our hair. That type of thing. We want to know all that up front. We do some very high level budgeting up front to understand, where we're the ballpark that we're looking at up front. And then from there, we can partition off sections of that and scale it back to fit the budget. Or, sometimes we swing for the fences and they say, all right, let's go.
It's been a while, but I think it was about 10 years ago. I did a construction loan for a Frank Lloyd Wright home in
Oh, yeah.
Chicago, and it has stained glass windows, those famous stained glass windows. And they thought it would be about $20,000 to restore them, and of course, this is 10 years ago money, and it turned out to be about $80,000 or $90,000 to restore these windows. They had a lot of them. What sort of things, I guess, like that are the things that clients are surprised at in terms of maybe underestimating certain things and being really, really surprised at these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's surprised about how expensive things have gotten in the last 6 years. Just in general, the cost of construction has escalated to a point where I get surprised by the cost of projects a lot of times. So just in general, they do, but it ends up being a lot of those finicky details like stained glass windows. Plumbing fixtures is one that people are generally surprised by. Cabinets are, you can get a very nice cabinet package, uh, but then you start to get into the details and you want five-piece doors and plywood construction, inset doors, custom hoods, all that kind of stuff. And it all kind of it just quickly moves up that budget. And those are the kind of spots that the clients are budgets get sticky. And so that's where up front, just setting expectations up front and aligning them to make sure that we understand, this is the level of kitchen that I'm anticipating so we can plan for it accordingly.
Yeah, and that's certainly, I'll go through that process with clients as well. I'll have a conversation with them um, a month or two before they even speak with builders, and they've got a number in mind on what it's going to cost.
Hmm.
And invariably, when I speak with them a few months later, that number is, one and a half, 2x.
Yeah.
They really don't expect that. I think it's that process, and I imagine you see it certainly a lot more than I do. That process of the shock and awe of the real number, and then they kind of settle in because in most cases, these clients are going to be living in the home for 10, 20, 30 years or more. So while they certainly are uncomfortable with it, I would imagine uh, there's a middle ground. I would imagine most clients will say, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it at some point. Let's get it done now versus later.
Yes. Yeah. So I really try hard to set those expectations up front, and I like it. Most clients, when that budget gets up there, they start to try to phase things out. And I try to explain to them that, like, there's a lot of advantage to doing this all at once up front. Cost advantage for one. It's going to be
Certainty.
significant. Yes. And exactly. And the cost of things escalating over time. and you get to enjoy it with your family now rather than going through construction for 3, 4, 5 years if you phase it out that way. And then by that time, how old are your kids, and are you using the house the way that you were intending to use it or not? So for a while there, it was we were doing these projects and they were appreciating almost immediately because the cost of the homes in the neighborhood were going up so quickly. I think we're starting to see that curtail a little bit here, a little bit, but we're doing projects that are going to appreciate in 2, 3, 5, on the worst case scenario, maybe 10 years. And most of these clients are in a scenario where they're at least 20 years in that house. And so these projects, they make sense. And then you get to enjoy the house that you are dreaming about for a long time.
Yeah, I'll have clients sometimes ask me, "What are your thoughts of phasing?" And I consistently will tell them it can work for some people. However, you phase in, whatever you're going to pay today is going to be up tomorrow. Rates go up and down. Mortgage rates go up and down. The whole phrase we had a couple of years ago, "rent the rate," right? When rates were at 8%. But rates go up and down, but costs, except for that one blip in 2008, 2009, costs go up every year. So I think, and I imagine that's just part of the process, right? The process for clients to kind of get their head around of, whether they should hope for flat down the road, flat prices down the road, or knowing that they'll probably move higher.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are important questions to ask too. It's a whole process going through. For most of my clients, this is the most money other than possibly buying the house that they're ever going to spend on a project, on any one thing. And so it is. It's important to find the right partner. It's important to go through this entire process to make sure that you understand and appreciate, and at the end of the day, you're going to end up with what you want.
Absolutely. And I guess one other question I have as well is timelines. So, do timelines differ from a standard renovation versus a historical renovation? Is it longer for, and then I guess you'd have to throw in landmark commissions as well. And if there's a landmark commission that's involved in the project, how do those timelines differ too? And what should clients' expectations be for that?
Yeah, I would say that schedules are really the biggest factor of a schedule is the contractor that you're hiring. Up front, we issue a schedule and say, this is your schedule. And then every week we send out a 2 week look ahead that says, this is where we are on that schedule. These are the decisions that we need made. And then the next biggest impact on that schedule is going to be client decisions, making those in a timely manner so that we can have materials to install. But no, I mean, we're really driven to get to maintain a good schedule, because that allows me to do more projects every year. As much as I love doing what I do, tearing apart and putting back together historic homes, I'm doing it to make a living, and 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 so it's important for me to get my team on and off your projects as quickly as possible, and that you're as happy as I can possibly make you, because I work in a very local area and I want to make sure that I have the recommendation from you for your neighbor. And
And
that's
that
how we
also
continue to
means,
do what we're doing.
and I imagine that also means if the client's getting a loan, you want to make sure that construction lender isn't slowing you down as well.
That's exactly right. Yes, got to keep funds moving. Got to get projects greenlit so that we can move forward, so that we can keep rolling with all these projects. So yeah,
When you think about all the homes that you've done over the years, the historical homes, is there one or two that stick out to you that might have been maybe challenging, rewarding, or surprising in terms of how it turned out?
yeah. My favorite project I think of all time was a 1870s house downtown on the north side of Wheaton, and it was really my first big historic addition remodel project. And the client was just great people, but he was living in China when we were doing the project. And so I would do a FaceTime meeting with him twice a week at like 7 o'clock at night. And it was a lot of him relying on us to make sure that we were doing everything the right way. And he wanted to make sure that we were making sure that we were doing all the things the right way, that we weren't stopping short and not delivering, the project that he was expecting. And it was a lot of really unique finishes. So that was it was also the first project that we dug down a deep basement next to a fieldstone foundation from 1870, and that's the type of thing that keeps you awake at night, making sure that that house isn't going to slide into that hole. But no, that's the one that stands out to me as probably my favorite project of my career so far.
And it sounds like he kind of gave you a lot of autonomy, and there was a lot of trust for you to. He laid out the broad vision and didn't micromanage. I would imagine that helps as well, given your experience, how many times you've done this. I would imagine, obviously you understand the client input. You'd love for them just to give you the broad vision, and then you just kind of do that based on your experience.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a contractor who's well suited for this, and you're hearing from three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine neighbors that, hey, this Wetmore Construction has delivered this project for us. We were incredibly happy. It seems to me like it would make sense to rely on them to deliver your vision. And he gave us that opportunity, and we did. We
That's
nailed
awesome.
it. So no, that's the best type of client to me is someone who definitely puts all their trust in us to deliver their vision.
So, as clients maybe who are considering purchasing a historical home, I guess what are some of the questions you would recommend that they ask the contractor that they're thinking about working with?
Yeah, I mean, biggest one's going to be experience because of the experience that we've had. We've seen almost everything, so we're going to give you a realistic budget up front, and it's probably higher than a contractor that's only flipping out kitchens or that's only doing new homes because they don't understand the intricacies of adding on and remodeling an old home. So I really think that it's the qualifications. How many of these projects have you done? Are you doing them in my neighborhood? Does the city, does the village, do you have a good repertoire with them? Um, you know, or or is this like, are we gambling on you that uh, you know, I've done a couple of these, but I mostly do siding and windows. Well, I think that's the first question, really.
And I would imagine if cities do have landmark commissions, that they would be able to reach out to those individuals and get a sense of who's doing these projects, right? Not necessarily who they would recommend, but at least who's doing the projects, and that would probably be a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that you're right. They shouldn't probably be recommending anyone, but they can certainly say, well, Wetmore Construction pulled 12 permits in our city last year. They're mostly on old homes. And these are maybe two other names that they did projects here as well. But I would say if we're continually performing work in these same towns over and over again, that there's a it's a common theme, and it's probably a pretty reliable place to start.
So, last question I have for you, just a little bit of nostalgia. Working with these older homes, and you also build brand new homes. What are some of the aspects of the older home that you really wish would come back and be part of brand new construction?
Yeah, I live in a house downtown Geneva, 1896, built in 1896. I love that turn of the century architecture and the styling, and a lot of that is coming back in right now. Not so much on the exterior finishes because of the cost; it is a expensive product, but interior finishes. We're seeing a lot of paneling. We're seeing a lot of crown details. We're doing a lot of built-ins, and that's the style that I really enjoy. Again, my job is to deliver my client's vision, But those are the projects that I really enjoy and enjoy being part of, replicating those finishes. And those were really the people doing the work in that time period. They were craftsmen, and it shows through to their work. And I really enjoy doing that kind of thing.
That's awesome. Well, Tom, I appreciate you taking the time today. This has been great. Historic homes are have always been something I've been interested in, and I've never purchased one, but I love walking through those old homes and seeing, like you said, some of that crown molding, some of the things that just aren't done today because people don't want to invest the money in. So I appreciate you sharing your expertise today.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me here. And I enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great day.
You too.